This webinar series has been a collaborative effort between the Arizona Center for Disability Law, Raising Special Kids, the University of Arizona's Sonoran Center for Excellence in Disabilities, and the Institute for Human Development at Northern Arizona University. We organize these webinars with the goal of acknowledging and addressing the questions and concerns from parents of students with disabilities and other high-needs students in light of COVID-19 school closures. Our first session was a listening session where we invited students, parents, and family members to share what their experiences with distance learning were like during COVID school closures and to ask any questions they had. We also created and distributed a survey to Arizona families asking them to share their questions and concerns. Based on this input, we invited speakers from different organizations and agencies to present on common topics of concern and to try to answer families' most frequently asked questions. Last week, we heard from the Arizona Department of Education Exceptional Student Services team, the Arizona Center for Disability Law, the American Civil Liberties Union of Arizona, the Native American Disability Law Center, and Raising Special Kids about topics including the right to a free and appropriate public education during school closures, compensatory education, equity of access to resources and support during distance learning, and best practices and resources that exist for families going forward. Today, we will be focusing on school reopening and what back to school might look like this year. During our listening session and in the survey responses we received, many families expressed concern about back to school and had questions about safety, accommodations, and how educational services will be provided to their children. Please note that when and how your child's school will reopen in the fall is a decision that will be made by your child's school district or charter administration and school board. Please keep that in mind as we hear from today's presenters, and feel free to follow up with your child's specific school to learn more about their plans. In order to provide a general idea of what back to school might look like this year, we've invited representatives from the Arizona Department of Education to discuss reopening guidance at the state level, as well as administrators from school systems across the state to answer questions about how their schools will approach reopening. Today, we are joined by Alyssa Trollinger and Mike Manelli from the Arizona Department of Education, Susan Smith from the Flagstaff Unified School District in Northern Arizona, Tom Dobler from Great Hearts Academy's Charter Network, Sarah Clem from the Marana School District in Southern Arizona, and Angela Moreno from Casablanca Community School in the Gila River Indian Community. I want to take a moment here to note that on Monday, June 29th, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey issued an executive order in response to the rising number of cases of COVID-19 in our state, which includes a requirement that schools not begin in-person instruction until August 17th, 2020 at the earliest. This order will impact the reopening plans developed by many of Arizona's schools. Please keep in mind that the information being shared today was current before that newest executive order and may change because of it. You should follow the news from the governor's office, the Arizona Department of Education, and your child's school to stay up to date on reopening plans. We're going to start by hearing from Alyssa Trollinger and Mike Manelli from the Arizona Department of Education about state-level guidance on school reopening. After Alyssa and Mike present, we will ask the school representatives some questions about their school reopening plans, and that portion of the webinar will be moderated by my colleague, Kathy Gray Mangerson from Raising Special Kids. So Alyssa and Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you very much. I think my video is working. Yes. Okay, well, thank you very much. My name is Mike Manley. I'm an associate superintendent at the Department of Education, and I'm here with Alyssa Trollinger, who's a deputy associate superintendent and the state director of special education for Arizona. Before we kicked off, I did want to share just a little bit of my background. I started out as a special ed paraprofessional. I'm still a certified special ed teacher, certified principal, and SPED director in the past. But it's important to realize that at this moment at the Department of Education, we have our superintendent of public instruction, an associate, and our state director of special education. We're all folks that have delivered SDI on an IEP at some point in our careers. So that's important to consider, and I'm thankful that our capacity for understanding special education has been excellent, particularly during these very difficult times. Part of the task that we're going to be sharing is, I think Alyssa was going to be sharing the screen about the roadmap for reopening schools that that the agency, the Department of Ed, had pushed out on at the beginning of June. There's a link where it can be found on the ADE website on the COVID-19 webpage. And while Ms. Trollinger is pulling that up, I wanted to thank John and Amanda Glass for reinforcing the fact that Arizona is very much a local control state. What they have said is very accurate, that with the way the rules work in our state, the most appropriate step is to talk to your local school. And there are some caveats in Arizona that might not be the same as they are in other states, but they're important to remember as we move forward, particularly in these unprecedented times. So we do in Arizona, this isn't true in all states, but we have an elected superintendent of public instruction. But at the same time, we obviously also have a governor of the state that is also duly elected. And so understanding their roles and how all of this guidance is pushed out it's very important. So for example, Governor Ducey, he oversees the implementation of public policy, including decision-making in times of crisis. And that includes executive orders. And we have a couple of new examples of that in the very, very recent past. It's important to understand that our superintendent of public instruction at ADE, our role is to set policy and regulations to ensure the compliance with those federal and state laws. But the public policy part comes from our executive in the governor's office. So while the governor does the decision-making for closures and these types of things, the agency's responsibility is to make sure that there are policies and regulations in place to ensure that we're following state and federal laws. And that brings up the important fact that AZCDL reinforced that it's the LEA, it's the local governing boards, be they districts or charters. They're really responsible for operating the schools, implementing the federal and state laws and the policies and academic standards, develop and implement local policies and curriculums. And in Arizona, when it comes to reopening, Arizona has the roadmap for guidance on how to go about doing that. But again, the local governing boards are going to be the ones that need to implement those kinds of guidelines. So understanding how that workflow works in this state and how it's a little bit different than, there's 49 other ways that these important policy decisions are put into place. But Arizona definitely has a bit of a unique stance on how our policy is put into place. With that being said, it looks like we have the guidance up and ready to roll. And I will introduce you again to Alyssa Trollinger, who has been at the department for over 15 years. She has become one of the veteran state directors of special education in the nation. I can't be more proud of the work that we've done as an agency under Alyssa's leadership. We've been really on point with some of the best guidance that we can during these difficult times. Understanding that just as of last week, the situation has changed. So this is a very dynamic system, but we're doing our utmost to get the best guidance out that we can to help move this ball forward as we approach the upcoming school year. So Alyssa, take it away.
Sure. Thank you so much for those kind words. I do feel like I've been with the department a very long time, and this is unprecedented. Let me tell you, nothing like this has occurred before, and I'm very, very thankful to have an educator at the helm. It makes making decisions a lot easier and a lot more rational. Which brings us to the development of the roadmap. Up on the screen, you'll see you can find the roadmap at the Office of Communications website at the Department of Education. If you look up at the top, it's azed.gov/communications. And I think if you just go to the top right, you can pop in roadmap in the Google search and it'll come right up. And then if you scroll down, the roadmap is organized in tabs that you can click with an intro and a number of sections. And before I walk through these, I want to tell you a little bit about how we developed the roadmap. During the stay-at-home order, it became clear that the state needed to provide some of that high-level guidance that Mike was just talking about to districts and charters, parents, all of the education stakeholders, and that we needed to do it really, really quickly. That is a tall order for those of you who have ever been around state government. Working quickly is not what we're known for, but I agree with Mike. I think we have banded together and come up with guidance on a lightning quick speed. But at any rate, we started working in the beginning of May, and by the beginning of June, we had the roadmap ready to go. It was a broad group of stakeholders that were convened really quickly. It included ADE representatives who really manned the different stakeholder committee groups. It included district and charter representatives, including special education administration, agency representatives, school nurses, Arizona School Board Association, speech and language groups, the Attorney General's Office, the Department of Health Services, school psychologists. Many different agencies came together and were engaged in conversation and kind of spread themselves out amongst the different committees. There were parents and family members who were engaged, and then there was a student group who was also engaged. So there was a real intentionality to including a broad representation of stakeholders in education, and that included regional representation because it was important to understand that Arizona has a lot of regional considerations when looking at reentry. So we met roughly 2 to 3 times a week. Some of the subcommittees met more than that. There was homework in between. It was a lot of information to wade through. There was a lot of researching and discussion and consideration in between that you had to bring back from your individual stakeholder roles to ensure that perspectives were considered and all of the angles that we could possibly think about were brought to the plan. And on June 1st, we rolled it out. So in general, it is organized as follows. There's consideration for leaders. And as you'll see, there are some kind of supporting documents, but there's a roadmap for leaders. There's consideration for teachers, considerations for families, considerations for students, and that's where the special education piece is held, and we'll get into that shortly. And then considerations for related service providers. The top 4 were released right away. Related service providers came out a little bit later. And then there are some supporting things that were added here to help people understand CARES Act, ESSER funding, school finance. So this is kind of a one-stop shop if you want to understand school reentry. Appreciating that the executive order we have to catch up since this has just occurred, and I know that there'll be more information that's provided.
So while looking at this roadmap, it's important to remember ADE's role is to set state level policy and regulations, but the local policies are set by your local district or charter, your local LEA. So it's important to remember when taking a look at this set of guidance, this roadmap, that what it is, it's a guidance document. It's not legal advice. It's based on evidence and expertise from those stakeholders that Alyssa talked about. It shouldn't be based on opinion or ideology. It's essential actions designated to spur some thinking and planning and prioritization but it really can't be an exhaustive list of every action that a district or school leader needs to return to schools. So it really truly is a roadmap with guidance. There's a continuum of decision making that goes into each individual LEA. And this can't be seen as a distance learning playbook or a school closure guidance document. It's really a overarching statewide document to help facilitate those discussions on what the parameters are for reopening. A fluid document that could change and grow based on the local trends and the statewide data. And we're seeing that this month. It really can't be the final word on how an LEA or a school is going to manage the next phases of COVID-19, but it is solid guidance on what some of the parameters might be. With that in mind, what that means for parents and educational leaders is every district and charter is going to need to make their own plan based on their own unique variables and circumstances and how to return to school and deal with school closures due to COVID considerations. Each LEA is going to need to set a program for services with students with disabilities that meets their local policy, which should be consistent with federal and state regulations. But it's going to look different from school to school. Kind of as an aside, I personally have 2 children. They're in our local public schools. One is in an elementary district and one is in a high school district. And their options are different based on their resources. And that's, as a parent, that's difficult, mitigating 2 different systems, but they each have the local control to take their variables and figure out what's in the best interest for their kids. Keeping in mind that the department, ADE, we really do have a limited oversight on how districts and charters are going to choose to implement upcoming school reentry. And it really is going to depend on the federal and state regulations and policy. So like it was suggested, we're all tuned in to the federal news and obviously the governor's executive orders, which is going to change this dynamic system. So those are some considerations when you're taking a look at the roadmap that ADE developed.
And I apologize for making you sick. I scrolled down. I wanted to get to the students with disability section.
Oh my God.
No. I was apologizing to everybody watching. It wasn't scrolling. The special education section in particular, I wanted to make sure we pointed out before we finished with our presentation today. This was the section that Mike and I had the most input on because this was the committee that we sat in. It's under consideration for students, student learning, and it's page 13 if you want to look for it. Student learning is broken up into 4 different scenarios. All students in physical buildings or brick and mortar, some students in physical buildings and some in distance learning, so kind of a hybrid model. All students distance learning, and intermittent distance learning or emergency closure. That's how it's organized. And the way that we approached the development of the recommendations is we looked at a whole variety of sources. We first of all looked at the federal guidance that we had been provided because that's where we always start. So we looked at guidance coming from the Office of Special Education Programs, from OCR, from national technical assistance centers that work with those federal oversight bodies. We looked at what other states were implementing, but that's always a little bit tricky because each state does things differently, as Mike referenced before. We looked at other guidance bodies, like guidance from the American Academy of Pediatrics. But we were basically looking as broadly as we could to see what kinds of high-level recommendations we could implement, understanding that students with disabilities, their education is individualized. So, and that individualized IEP approach is really between the district and, or the IEP team within the district. And we can't speak to that specifically. So we have to keep our guidance very high level. So if you look at how it's organized, column 1, the brick and mortar column, serves as the foundation. Every single column starts off with students must be provided equitable access to the general curriculum and a free appropriate public education, or FAPE, in accordance with their IEPs. That's pretty basic. And everything in column 1 transfers over to column 2, which is hybrid learning. And then the recommendations start to build on one another. So an example of a recommendation we would offer in the hybrid that we didn't offer in the brick and mortar would be students with disabilities should have equitable access to school buildings, to brick and mortar options, if they are available to students without disabilities. So it wouldn't be a good idea to say all students with disabilities, you only get a remote option if a hybrid model and a brick and mortar is available to students without disabilities. That would be the converse. And then the same is true for the third column, which is just distance learning. It considers all of the options in columns 1 and 2. And then an example specific to distance learning might be determine the specific needs of a student to access instruction. How will they access the technology? How will they be supported with instruction? How will IEP meetings be held remotely? Because that's really kind of the cornerstone of how you're going to develop what a student's going to have in general. And then the final column for the intermittent model, their IEP will be met within those options. And then wrapping up this general overview, I think it will be very good to hear from the local options from the district and charter staff that are going to be presenting to you, because that's really where the local policy, the local implementation will be seen. So I think at this point, Mike and I will step back and let the local experts weigh in. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Alyssa and Mike. That was very helpful information. And now we're going to be switching to the presentation from the LEAs. We have Susan Smith, who's the Exceptional Student Services Director for Flagstaff Unified School District, and Tom, let me get it right, Tom Dobler, from the National Director of Exceptional Student Services with Great Hearts, Sarah Clem, who's the Exceptional Student Services Director with Marana Unified, and Angela Moreno with Exceptional Student Services Coordinator for Casablanca Community School, which is a Bureau of Indian Education Schools. And we have Teresa Baca, who's the Executive Director of Special Education for Mesa Unified. So what we're going to do for each of these is I'm going to read a question, and then I'm going to call on each of these directors who will answer that question for how it's going to work in their district as of this moment. And it could obviously change going forward, but it might give you an idea of what the schools are doing within the state. So thank you to all of these guys in advance. And the first question is, what are your school's plans for in-person learning, distance learning, and/or hybrid learning when schools open? And do parents have to pick one? If you could include that information with this question, that'd be great. Susan, why don't you start for us?
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody. I'm Susan Smith. I'm a director in the Flagstaff Unified School District. And while I have this opportunity, I just wanted to thank Mr. Manley and Ms. Challenger for your guidance and support. It's been very helpful. We are going to be offering 3 different models, similar to probably what everybody's offering, but an in-person model, a remote model, and a distance learning model. So I'll go through those quickly. The in-person model, we're going to be providing services according to students' IEPs. Special education interventions and specially designed instruction will be continue there in that model. The district will be utilizing data from parents regarding the number of students returning to in-person learning, specifically at our specialized program classrooms, to potentially alter classrooms to ensure small class sizes and spacing in those programs. We're going to be utilizing barriers, plexiglass, face shields, because we know that although face coverings will be required for all of our students 2 years and up, it will be challenging for some. So we will be utilizing some unique situations as well as spacing in that environment. In our remote learning environment, special education services will definitely be different than our last fourth quarter. We're really stepping up our game, and our teachers have been trained, and so we are ready to roll out a more extensive support model to our families. We'll be providing services according to students' IEPs, and services may be one-on-one or in small groups. IEP teams may need to meet to discuss and make sure that IEP services can be successfully implemented in that remote learning environment for students with more intense needs. Interventions and specially designed instruction will also be utilized in these programs. For just an example, the Barton Reading Program, we will be utilizing that in a online format for students. Parents will be given guidelines to help follow and help support students within the online learning. Students are going to have required class and service and therapy time where they're going to be interacting. It could be a live stream, or it also could be a pre-recorded lesson. We're going to be doing all different types of models, making sure we're meeting the individual needs of our students. Progress, information, grades, it's all going to be collected and recorded, and paraprofessionals are also going to be utilized virtually for the students that do qualify for that additional help and support for students' needs and IEP support. The last one is our distance learning, and that we call it Northern Arizona Distance Learning, and it's for students grades 5th through 12th. We utilize MESA distance learning, so teachers are coming through the MESA distance learning. We do have a full-time special education teacher that's hired through FUSD that will be supporting and providing services to students through that model.
Thank you, Susan. Tom?
Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Dobler. I'm the National Director of Exceptional Student Services for Great Hearts. I'd like to echo Susan's thanks to our colleagues at the Department of Education. Their guidance in quarter 4 was very helpful as we struggled to serve our students who were suddenly taken away from us, right, and taken home. So at this time, Great Hearts is planning on running a model that's a hybrid model that allows for students to be back in our brick-and-mortar schools, or if parents opt to choose, and it is a choice for our students of Great Hearts schools, to use distance learning through Google Classroom, if that's what they want. With regards to the brick-and-mortar, our plan is to, with safety measures that we'll be talking about in a couple of minutes, I understand, to try to make the school experience as similar as it was before all of this happened, right? We want to try to get our school communities back up and running as similar as they used to be, with the full understanding that, things are probably going to look different for a little while. So you should expect, if you're a parent of a Great Hearts student, to have your child back with their teachers and back with their special education providers. We're going to do similar things to what it sounds like Flagstaff is doing with regards to making sure that the physical space is safe and that too many kids aren't in the same place at the same time. For the distance learning, I'll skip over what we're doing for all students and focus really in on students with disabilities. Our two priorities with regards to our families and students with disabilities is to make sure that there's a connection remains with their campus and their teachers from last year, but also make sure that they receive the special education services as outlined in their IEPs. So case management will really be handled by the academy and the academy staff. And we will use a combination of academy staff and potentially a network-wide special education teacher to provide the distance learning, specially designed instruction all through the Google Classroom platform. And yeah, I guess I'll stop there to give other districts time to talk, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Sarah?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me, Kathy, and thank you to ADE and the Center of Disability Law too. I think this is such a unique situation to support our families through, and we're all learning together. So right now in Marana, we have been working all summer, like everyone else, trying to come up with some models that will serve our students as best as we possibly can through this really unique time that we're living through together. The first one, of course, is our brick-and-mortar school. And when we're able to reopen, we will reopen with all those precautions in place that Susan referred to, but also all the specially designed instruction, the different levels of intervention, you know, providing services the way we have in the past, just with more safety and health precautions in place. The second offering we have is also MESA's distance learning. We call it MDL, and that is a little more rigorous. It is offered for 5th through 12th grade. It's a little more self-paced. We also have a special education teacher assigned to support students who select this model. But we have worked hard as a district to develop a third model that would be a virtual online opportunity for students to learn too. They would also use a Google Classroom format. They would stay connected to their home school. They would follow Marana curriculum maps. They would have Marana teacher assigned, who is also PLCing with grade level teachers in our district, so that when kids can come back, they would be right back right along, aligned to what their other friends had been learning while they had to be at home. And of course, parents get to pick which option. There'll be an opportunity to start making those selections very shortly. And I think also with those 3 models in mind, that still won't meet the needs of all of our students. And so at that point, we need to start scheduling some IEPs and developing models that will meet the need for everybody. So we know that some students might need shortened days, or might need to come once or twice a day, or might need services more at home but not virtually. And how are we going to do that? And so that's where we're lucky that our students have individual education plans, and we can still meet and make those changes and make sure people's needs are getting met the very best that we can.
Thank you, Sarah. Angela?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to join. I just wanted just to speak a little bit about myself. I'm a special education coordinator here at Castle Lincoln Community School, but I'm also a special education teacher. We're a relatively small district, so I have a dual role, and I get to see a lot. And I work with all of my students with disabilities, so it's a very rewarding kind of experience to administrate here as well as teach. So yeah, so we're a travelly controlled school. So we're a grant school that's completely bureau funded. We don't receive state funding. We have to adhere to the federal, state, and community guidance within Hill River with our reopening plan that we had developed. And just like all of your schools, we have the same kind of format: the in-person, the hybrid, and the distance learning format for our students that we're trying to engage in. And it's all based on parent choice. So we're really focused on what our parents feel safe doing. And that's kind of where we're going. As far as our curriculum, we have a rigorous curriculum that we utilize with our students through Great Minds. And in special education, we also have our own curriculums that we utilize with our students. And it was pretty effective, I would say, last when we had the closure through special education, for us to continue some of those curriculums through a similar platform like this, where we did a lot of teleservices and that kind of thing, teletherapies with our related service providers. So, we're just trying to make sure that we're still being prepared. We're training all of our staff in the next coming weeks. So a big part of our reopening plan is to help train our parents as well. So that's a big piece of this, and it's been delayed about a week though already because of some of the changes that have occurred. But we do plan on starting up virtual on August 3rd. So we're really excited.
Thank you, Angela. Teresa?
Good afternoon, everybody. So we just had our board meeting last night and reviewed our plan with our school board. So we too will be starting on August the 4th. Primarily, we are really just refining much of the work, sort of that emergency response that happened in March. We learned a lot of lessons and got feedback from our families and our teachers about the barriers that were there. So our big push is one-to-one devices for all of our students. And so we're really focusing on ensuring that all of our students have access to computers, and then supporting access to ensure they have internet access. So on the general ed side, many of our resource students will participate. We have adopted Florida virtual learning as the online platform for our general ed K through 6, and then of course MDLP for our secondary schools. We use Freckle as that specially designed instruction, more one-on-one support for our resource students, and some of our self-contained programming. And so for us, I feel like our work is really around the assessment when our students come back to us, and really understanding, you know, where they made progress and where we really have work to do to catch up. So we feel like we pretty, you know, with our self-contained, the plan, though not perfect, seemed to be more effective than for perhaps our resource students. We felt that there was some consistency challenges that we want to work on campus to campus, where we have 11,000 plus students. So, you know, many of our families had concerns about there being consistency in practice from school to school. So those are our focuses right now. Now, differing a little bit, we are working with our legal counsel. We have a pretty strong parent community for our autism programming, and a lot of concerns about sensory needs and masks. So we're doing a lot of work now with our legal counsel to understand how we accommodate students who are going to struggle wearing masks. We would be requiring age 6 and above. And so working with our preschool families around what that will look like for them, and then addressing the concern around the needs of our sensory students.
Thank you, Teresa. We're going to move along to question 2, and that is, what are some of the steps your schools are taking to address health and safety concerns related to COVID-19? Susan?
Thank you, Kathy. And I realized that I didn't answer the question that you asked before about whether or not parents have to choose. And so I just wanted to start off with, we will be sending out information so that parents do have to choose a model going into the school year, but we are all going to have to be nimble in providing whether or not we're able to provide in-person schooling. So I just wanted to say that, sorry. We're going to be following CDC guidelines, you know, on social distancing and requiring face coverings by all. We do have a statement in our guidelines that are being set out that any student who has difficulty breathing, or documentation from a healthcare provider indicating that they cannot wear a face covering, or anybody who is unable to remove that face covering themselves without assistance, will not be required to wear a face mask at school. So we do have that wording in our guidance. Additional cleaning is going to be continuing and ramping up big time, especially in our some of our specialized program classrooms. I mentioned face shields and plexiglass stands earlier, just because, you know, speech therapy, what does that look like with masks on? So we understand that we're going to have to be flexible and nimble in that arena. So plexiglass and face shields may be more appropriate in that instance. All of our staff will be doing temperature checks daily going into the building as well.
Thank you, Susan. Tom?
Yeah, so we've struggled with this one internally as an organization, because we have some some pretty deeply held philosophical beliefs about student formation, and so there's a tension between, right, the need to keep people safe and distant, and cover their faces and noses, right? Their mouths and noses. But also things that we believe, like the fact that healthy student formation requires unstructured time with their peers outside of class, and human contact is essential to the human experience, right? So balancing those things has been really difficult. Our plan for safety is really kind of twofold. There's an offensive plan, right, which is built around prevention, and then a defensive plan, which is built around what if something happens, because we are fully aware that there's no way to prevent, right? Or that it's highly likely that at some point someone will be in the school unintentionally who may have contracted the virus. So we're doing things like really educating parents about assessing their kids at home, right? There's those 3 questions from the CDC about symptoms and contact with another person. Have they traveled outside of the country? We'll be doing screening of all students and all staff using instant read thermometers before they come into the building for the day. And lots of cleaning and things like we've upgraded all of our HVAC filters to hospital grade to make sure that, right, that the air is safer to breathe. Face coverings have been a hotly contentious debate within the Great Hearts community, both faculty and staff at the lead office and at the academies, and among parents. There are people on both sides. But at this point, we're following the guidelines set out by Maricopa County, which require face masks. So we happily follow those guidelines. In order to limit the contact of students and staff throughout the day, we're going to be adjusting our schedules to make sure that too many kids aren't in the hallways at the same time. We're adjusting our schedules regarding what time recess and lunch and things like that happen as well, to make sure that our students can, right, sort of in the safety of their cohort, get out and be active, but at the same time, trying to make sure that not all classes are out at once. And further, I think one of the big things is really modeling and helping teach our kids that safe habits are about good citizenship, right? It's not about being afraid for yourself, but it's about making sure that you do the things that you need to do to take care of your friends, to take care of your teachers whom you love. And so that's a big part of what we're thinking about and talking about for our students, both with disabilities and neurotypical. And then so that's sort of all the offensive side of the things. And on the defensive side, we have what we call an incident and response team that's going to be working closely with with our resources in the community to decide what to do with our schools should a person or a student or a teacher be confirmed to have had the virus and also have been in the building. So that is the sum of it. I also want to say that all of these plans are on our website. So if you're a parent of a student with a child at Great Hearts, go to our website. All that information is there.
Thank you, Tom. Sarah?
Thank you. So we are working on making all of these decisions as well. In Marana, we officially got a new superintendent yesterday, Dr. Streeter. So we have not made a final decision about masks and things like that, but I know that we are meeting with Pima Health Department and following CDC. There just hasn't been an official call on that, so I don't want to make any assumptions of what I think we're going to do on face masks, because I think that's the most highly emotional topic as far as safety at school with our kiddos. But I know that we are working on additional cleaning. We've even talked about cleaning buses in between morning and afternoon routes, and preschool AM and preschool PM, and even cleaning down playground equipment so that our preschool kids could go outside and play. As we know, gross motor play is so important. So really thinking about cleaning things that we haven't necessarily sanitized before, and getting some processes in place to make sure that's happening. We're talking about how we're going to serve breakfast and lunch. Will it be in classrooms? Will we utilize outdoor spaces? Each of our buildings are so different. That might not be a district hall, that might be a principal hall, as long as it's following some of our guidelines given to us. We're also talking about having more prepackaged things instead of things being prepared. So there's just so many committee meetings and PPE being purchased and parent and student input. And this is a huge undertaking to think about how to really make sure we're sanitizing and cleaning and keeping everyone as healthy as possible. Just like Tom said, we're marking sidewalks to be one way so that kids are not passing other classes in between arrival and dismissal time. We're looking at how we're going to handle arrival and dismissal time to try to keep people social distanced and safe as much as possible. We've also been talking about we need to do a lot of parent training and teacher training. We did a great job of going emergency remote learning, but virtual online learning looks very different, making sure we have some training in place for that, as well as IEP meetings and other kind of parent meetings will all be through Zoom and other virtual formats right now to make sure that we're keeping all the adults safe while we're preparing for our kiddos to hopefully come back. As well as also developing more training for our staff on the virus and the importance of the precautions. So there's a lot of things in the works, and it's an interesting time and a really thoughtful process our district's going through to make sure everybody stays healthy and safe.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Angela?
Yes, so our school has, just enforced some of the similar mitigation strategies that you all described. So for our in-person plan with our students, we have a built-in part-time schedule where we do perform that deep sanitization between groups, and also with our transportation, our buses, we purchased a piece of equipment that will allow for that. I don't know exactly what it's called, but we are able to deep clean our rooms pretty quickly and effectively. We also have a janitorial service that provides our school with that deep cleaning as well at the end of the day. We have those daily screeners in place. They've been in place already for our essential staff that's on site right now. So that carries over to our visitors. So we have parents, if they come in to do enrollments, that kind of thing. We do have a mandatory mask policy. We understand that will carry over to our students, but with the understanding if it's not going to work out for our students with disabilities, that kind of thing. If we have face shields, and we also have I purchased a few of those the transparent masks for speech and language therapies, or even just for instruction is really good for our students to be able to see your lips and how you're moving. We work in a K-4 school. I didn't explain that. So we do a lot of early reading skills. We work on those. So really need to look at our lips. Our class sizes are capped at 10. Students aren't allowed to share items. We have 6 feet distance between our students. Classroom brain breaks are available. Regular hand cleaning will be enforced. And wherever feasible, we have outdoor structured play. We have a sensory sidewalk at our school, so that's something that is being scheduled. For our vulnerable staff, we've considered them, and we're providing some of those telework options, definitely to support the families choosing to remain fully online. We've also considered the other physical needs of our families, our free and reduced lunch program, ensuring that continues throughout the day. Again, with some of those packaged foods like were described, that we have a contactless kind of drive-through or delivery available to parents if they want to be, or if they're going to be doing the distant learning program. We're also addressing the social emotional needs of our students. We have full-time counselor, full-time social worker on staff. We have a daily virtual check-in with them. It's just like a survey just to make sure our emotional well-being of our students, and we can provide families with resources or supports through those individuals.
Thank you, Angela. Teresa?
So very similar, much of the same conversations going on. So we are, again, really focused, as just spoken about, the social emotional well-being of our students. And so our counselors are forming groups to be able to address, upon return, doing some assessments and addressing students' needs right from, the very beginning, using Sanford Harmony for our K through 6 programs on a scheduled basis. So we really see, even with our own staff, just really that high social emotional need right now. We gave our teachers a survey asking them, which environment they felt that was most safe for them and for their families. And I had a teacher reach out and ask, she said, they should have a box that said, please use me wherever I can be of assistance. And so I think people are just really looking for ways that they can be responsive, support their students, support each other. And so we want to make sure that we continue to build on that culture of, taking care of each other and meeting the needs of both our families, students, and colleagues. So, again, we're working on policy and practice around masks, as stated by Tom. It's a, very passionate issue across all of our communities. And so we want to be prepared to have the best practice in place and ready to go should we return on the 17th in person. So protocols very much like discussed, how to use, right instruments. Music is very important to the Mesa community. So how do we share instruments? What are the protocols for cleaning in between use of different items? How to schedule classrooms onto the playground and really limit the size of groupings of kids. So all of those details, which, now we will be presenting our final plan to our school board the middle of July. And then we know that our school principals are going to be responsible for creating, really at the detail level, what this looks like at each individual school and meeting those community needs. So I think there's really not a lot to add because it's, all of us are grappling with the very same concerns and are taking many of the same best practice approach based on CDC guidelines and, the governor's order.
Thank you, Teresa. Now we're going to move along to question 3. If distance learning continues, how will your schools address the needs of students who cannot effectively engage in distance learning? Susan?
Oh, this is such an important question in a conversation. This keeps me up at night thinking about students that aren't getting what they need through distance learning. So it's important for me to continue to problem solve with not only teachers, but families on the best way to do this. We are hoping that with some of the changes made to the learning platform that we've made, screen sharing, mouse sharing, that it will help students engage more and not just giving packets, but actually having some one-on-one or live stream videos will help with that engagement. We would also use parapros to help engage families and students, and group teaching for students to engage with peers as well. Teachers have learned more about the electronic platforms and how to engage students online and have had professional development there. So I think that's going to help as well. I've been meeting with parents to get their feedback, and this has been the topic of conversation. We discuss different things, and one thing is, can we get some one-on-one instruction that's in person with some of our students that are really not able to engage in distance learning? And that's a hard conversation. It's a hard topic, and trying to get around governor's orders and make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, but also meeting the needs of our students. So I don't have a great answer to that, but we are continuing to have conversations about it.
That's all we can ask. Thank you. Tom?
Oh man, echo. I was actually hoping that some of you guys would give me ideas when I came into this, when I came into this webinar today, because I have a lot of the same thoughts as Susan does. I, Google Classroom is a really powerful tool. It has a lot of Chrome add-ons that you can do that allow students to do all sorts of things that will up engagement. But at the end of the day, there are going to be students who either can't or won't engage in that screen, right? And packets may not work. And so as a starting place, we ran into this in the spring, right? As a starting place is we just need to work with parents to understand exactly what the barrier is, and then do whatever we can to mitigate that barrier. And that was sometimes successful and sometimes it was not successful this spring. So a lot of the same things we've thought about, right? Really leveraging our paraprofessionals, making sure that our students have access to each other virtually. A lot of the stuff that Susan said are the things that are on our minds, but it definitely keeps me up at night as well. The thought that there are some students for whom we're really going to struggle reaching. And there it just starts with the relationship between the parents and the schools and trying to get creative on how to help the parents really help their children, because that's sort of where the rubber meets the road with distance learning and online instruction.
Thank you, Tom. Sarah?
Really quick, Kathy, I wanted to clarify when I was talking about masks, I was talking about the age levels. I know that we will be wearing protective gear and things like that, but I don't know if we've made a call on what age groups will be more heavily required than others, knowing that many kids, they need concessions. So I just wanted to clarify that in case people are panicking, thinking that we weren't going to do it at all, because we've purchased plenty of them and shields and things like that. So I just wanted to clarify that real quick.
Thank you.
And I echo what my colleagues say. This is a really tough question, and I do think that we have gotten so much better and what we can provide virtually. There was different examples given to you about individual or small group therapy and maybe in-home therapy. I mean, maybe what we want to do is make sure we're really focusing on staying healthy and safe, and maybe make these services up in the summer. Because I've really thought a lot about this in-home. Even if August 17th we all come back, but some kids don't come back because they're medically fragile. I don't necessarily, even if I take a staff member's temperature, I can't be positive that they're not one of those people who are asymptomatic and then goes to a child's home and exposes them. I mean, nobody would be able to forgive themselves for that. So I almost hesitate in wanting to offer in like homebound kind of services that we used to offer in people's homes until I can be sure it's safe. I'd really rather us be healthy and here and make it up later. Is kind of what my first inclination is, but of course it will need to meet with families and listen, and it will still be a fluid situation because there isn't really a great third alternative right now. But we have thought of different places that are out of the flow of traffic, that are, I don't want to say isolated, but pretty private, where you could just bring a child who was medically fragile for some therapy one-on-one, where you wouldn't have to run into other kids, and like my office even, things like that maybe we could come up with some kind of an alternate middle ground. But yes, this is a toughie, and we want to make sure everyone's in a healthy place first, knowing that we may have to make up services in the future anyway.
Appreciate that, Sarah. Angela?
Yeah, so in our distant learning program, like we piloted a summer program that was fully digital. So one of the things that we were trying to focus on was to ensure that we were creating equity and accessibility to our families. And in doing so, we were providing the technology, the actual devices, as well as, Wi-Fi and the hotspots. And I will be honest, it wasn't, you can give everybody the tools and they may not work 100%, but you know, it's because of there's other variables. Many of our families are multi-generational, multi-family homes. Some of our families just have like different things going on. And so it's that communication, keeping that empathy, that open-mindedness and understanding that can go a long way with our families. So just to, you know, continue working on, that communication with our parents. We've considered online group sizes, scheduling, different meeting options to meet parent schedules, being flexible. That's something that we're looking at and we're trying to improve as far as, what strategies or different things that we can try to do. We really have to we're just operating within what is allowable in the community right now. And right now, some of the things that we are doing, we're trying to enforce, like, our paper packets that support our online learning program, following up with parent phone calls, emails, letters as needed, just to try to create some multiple layers of support to all of our families, and just understanding that everybody has different needs and everyone has different abilities.
Thank you. Teresa?
Hi. So the same, I think that what we've learned is that partnering with our parents is probably works to our advantage more now than ever. So the feedback we have gotten from families about what they believe will work for them has really helped us to look at our work creatively and really meet those individual needs. I agree, it is, our very high needs students, whether it's an emotional disability or a severe intellectual disability, meeting the needs of those students is just really weighing heavy on us. We know that in this, what, we kind of are calling the emergency teaching, the plan was really to get out there and meet the large group of needs. And what we found was that the groups of population who had the most difficult time, parents also had a difficult time, figuring out how to help them engage remotely. And so, we've been working with our therapy providers who I think have some really interesting ways of looking at the work. And so we're collaborating with our speech therapist and our occupational therapist and trying to ensure that those therapies, those related services, that we do a really effective job in planning to ensure that our students get their related services in a way that's meaningful and keeps them, supports progress on their goals. But I agree, I think it is a very difficult challenge. We also know that the CDC is limiting some of the procedures that are just part of daily care for students. So those aerosol generated procedures that we can no longer perform on our school campuses, we are going to be soliciting information from our families all the way down to our students who receive treatment for their asthma, which would be not just special ed students, but trying to understand from our parents what procedures are part of necessary day-to-day support of our students, and what is the option when those procedures can no longer be performed in a school setting because of the highly contagious nature and at risk that it puts those students at. So, we're doing a lot of work with that with our nursing team to identify students that have these procedures, and then having conversations for our parents about what it's going to look like, when we do come back in person. So I think, we found that hopefully since we will have one-to-one devices in Mesa, that alleviates some of the stress of families of sharing devices and prioritizing the use of devices in the home by by their individual children, that in the setting where every student will have a device in Mesa, that this will be a positive move to making sure that every student has access. But I agree, it's very challenging and weighs heavy on our minds here too.
Thank you. Moving along to question 4. What steps do you recommend that parents take now to prepare themselves and their students for back to school? Susan?
This is a great question. Right now, my heart is with parents, and asking them to do anything more than they're already doing is not what I want to do. But I'm going to answer the question. Wearing masks is very difficult for some students and adults. But if parents can help them practice and reinforce that at home, starting with small increments and time and slowly increasing that amount of time, that would help students be more prepared upon coming to school and not being frightened by seeing people wearing masks or shields or that kind of thing. So really integrating that into their daily lives. There's also going to be a variety of social distancing visuals being used at schools, tape on the grounds and seats marked off. And so if they could help to practice that with seeing some of those visuals at home would help. And lastly, our sleeping schedules are just not the same during the summer, and they probably haven't been the same for a couple months. And so when we get back to going to school, it's helpful to plan ahead and to slowly adjust those bedtimes and the wake up times to make the mornings go easier. So those are just my suggestions, but I feel you.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan. Tom?
Yeah, so I guess when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking, what if, if my daughter was child age, what I would do with her. And I think the first thing is just educate yourselves about what your local school is doing. They have a website and they have plans for reopening on it. You have time, right? To Susan's point. Try to read and figure out what exactly your child should expect. Reach out to your school with questions if you have them, and if you can connect with your child's case manager, the person who will do so, to talk about what those first days of school will look like, and find out if there's going to be arrows on the ground or signs that they should know. I really, I'll just ditto the comment on practicing wearing masks and keeping the hands away from the face at home. If they can do it in a really casual environment, sort of without thinking, then when they're back at school, it'll be that much easier for them to do it there. And then the last thing that I thought about was talking to your kids about how to converse with their peers about the virus and about the habits that we practice to keep each other safe. This goes back to what I said about safety in our schools, and really focusing on good habits as an expression of good citizenship, right? As opposed to we do these things because we're afraid. That will make the school community, I think, a better place for them to be if everybody is practicing that same, we do these things for each other, as opposed to we do these things for ourselves. That's where I'll end it.
Good points. Sarah?
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. Right, I think the most important thing, Kathy, we can do is talk to our kids about their feelings, have some open conversations, let them have a safe place to vent if they're upset. If they weren't upset, talk about how great they were at adapting to a unique situation. I think at a minimum, what we went through last quarter and how we're starting off is a change, a disruption, and for some of us, it was really traumatic. And I think that sometimes we're skipping over the feelings, especially our kiddos who are transitioning from an elementary school to a secondary school, or my own daughter will be a freshman in high school, and so maybe start driving by that school and talking about where the entrances are and things like that, and talking to the new IEP teams about supporting transition, because that was cut really short. I mean, my daughter, who I annoy when I breathe too loud, wants me to go with her on the first day of school. So you know that they're anxious about it. And so I think really making sure that we're talking that through and that you engage your school teams and helping you with that. All kids struggle with transition, but we know students with disabilities sometimes struggle even more with that. I ditto what my colleagues are saying too about practicing your masks and social distancing. We're not used to coming back to school and not hugging our friends that we've missed or whispering a secret in their ear. And that's not safe to do right now. So that really has to be talked about and practiced, I think, ahead of time. Because I don't want someone to think they're in trouble because they hugged someone, you know, but we need to practice that and make sure kids understand that. So please, I think, practice and talk about the masks and the social distancing and engaging your team, especially for the kiddos that will be transitioning schools. We have a big job ahead of us.
Very excellent points. Thank you so much. Angela?
Yeah, so again, just a lot of mirroring of what you all have stated. Yeah, I'm a parent of, younger school-age children, so just keeping an open mind, having those conversations about the state of what we're going through right now. Always just kind of being prepared for some of the changes that might happen in school too, just being open-minded about that. Practicing good hygiene with your children, washing hands, making sure that's being enforced. Yeah, those routines, consistency, maintaining a certain level of productivity is super important too, because that's kind of what we do at school. So preparing for that transition to school, and also just maintaining the communication with your school district or asking questions on exactly what the school is going to be doing, what the physical dynamics are going to be like at the school is really important for each individual to consider. And then just maintaining that optimism and taking care of yourself. I think those are really important kind of things for me to recommend to parents at this point in time.
And it would help all of us to remember all those to take care of ourselves. Thank you, Angela. Teresa?
So, of course, again, we're all very similar thinkers here, but I would encourage parents to prepare questions, write them down as we get closer to the beginning of the school year, and not be afraid to ask those questions, whether it's a question of the teacher, of the principal, or us as directors, but to really have a plan. If you have questions, write them down and make sure all of your questions get answered. I think that that's really important to create that, positivity about school and just relaxing about if you have any unanswered questions or concerns, ask the person. And I think we're all just really trying our best to ensure that everybody feels comfortable as we come back. I would encourage parents to review their IEPs and to ask questions about goals or questions about progress, so that as they're starting the new year, the plan, they really understand the plan and how we're going to address student needs. So taking a good review of the IEP. I think you want to be very open with the teacher about what were the barriers that were experienced by the student, but also what were their successes. So, that you're building that relationship with your teacher. For many of our parents, they'll see the same teacher, in the upcoming school year, but it's really, just continuing to build and partner with your teacher and even our directors. We are very accessible. We've shared our cell phone numbers with our parents and really tried to make ourselves as accessible as possible to our parents. And then really not to pressure your student to catch up. We're all, the whole country was in this situation. So I think we want to make sure that our students don't feel an undue pressure to somehow quickly pick up any of the academics that were delayed, or the lack of progress that was may have been experienced. So I would say that there's going to be a need for a lot of positivity, a lot of need for relationship building, so that our students feel safe and know that we're all partnering to do the best for them.
Thank you, Teresa. You have all brought up some great points, and we really appreciate you thinking very long and hard on these questions, because that will help the parents who are in the audience be more prepared for their school to reopen. Thank you for that. Question 5, if school-wide distance learning needs to happen again, like Alyssa talked about, we have the emergency where all the schools are closed down. What plans do your schools have in place for addressing the access inequities, the lack of internet, the lack of device, that type of thing faced by families? Susan?
Yeah, good question. Such a great question, because this is a tough one. I mean, we're lucky that our community has voted in a one-to-one device initiative. So all of our students at middle school and high school got them last year. And so elementary is our last rollout, which is going to be happening in August, which is going to help us tremendously because there will be one-on-one iPad devices for every student in our district. So that being said, that makes it easier for us. Hotspots have been purchased through the CARES Funding Act that we've received, and we will have those available for families that need it. We're looking at about 5% of our districts need, 5% of our families in our districts needing that. And we're also opening up our internet, and we have already done this to be able to access in our parking lots. Because some of our families, specifically on the Indian reservation, even the hotspots aren't working out there. So Loop Public School is one of our schools that the internet works in the parking lot. So we've had families utilizing that by just driving, sitting in their car. They have their iPad. Not ideal at all, but at least we can ensure access for everybody.
Thank you. Tom?
Hi, I was informed that part of my last answer was cut off because I was either being too quiet or not close enough to the microphone. And it's just been compounded by, it sounds like a leaf blower at my neighbor's house. So if you guys don't hear me, I apologize, but I'll do my best to project and speak up. So at least in our experience, the biggest inequity that we found that was difficult to solve was the bandwidth of our caregivers and parents to support their kids. And that relates, I think, a lot to question number 3, right? Where partnering with whoever is with those children at home and coaching them and giving bite-sized lists of strategies and things like that for how to teach their kids. That's about as good as, you know, sort of the things that we talked about on that first question. The tech issues, the devices, at least for Great Hearts, has been a relatively straightforward thing for us to solve because all of our schools are in the Phoenix area, right? And so hotspots work, and we have one-to-one devices, you know, our device for any child who needs it. Yeah, so much like what Susan said.
Thank you. Sarah?
And in Marana, we were lucky because we have had one-to-one devices for a while. We had to figure out how for kids who hadn't taken it at home over spring break, and for the little ones, some of the primary grades didn't take them home, but they were assigned, and we did some drive-through pass outs and parking lots and stuff. So in some ways we were ahead of the curve because we did have Chromebooks for every child and iPads for some students and exceptional student services. So we did need to work on hotspots. We had some and we have more now, but for a while they were a hot commodity and you couldn't get your hands on them. So we did provide lists of free places for Wi-Fi, as well as, of course, school parking lots and things like that, which again isn't ideal. And for some families, we did have to print things out and hand deliver, and that was fine, and we were happy to do that. One of the things I think I'm most proud of our district is they've figured out a way to feed all of our kids through different drive-through options and then also delivery services to make sure everybody got meals. And so many of our kids depend on us for that basic need, and it happened all through the summer as well. And so bus drivers, you know, our health services, all these people came together and made sure that we were we were all fed. So one of the things we've also been working on, because we did have the Chromebooks, but as a district, we weren't synced as far as who's supposed to be Zooming at what time. And so if a family had several kids, or even several teachers, there might have been expectations that weren't great as far as everybody needs to be on at 9, and then whose house has that great of Wi-Fi? Not many, right? So we're doing, scheduling that out so that different grade levels will have different times, and hopefully that will help our families be able to utilize the Wi-Fi that they have with the devices we're able to provide. So there's a lot more. I think the emergency remote learning, we learned a lot through it, which will really help us moving forward. I mean, that was, by tomorrow, we need to figure out how to meet people's needs. And so we definitely did our best, but there were a lot of lessons learned and a lot of parents and teachers and administrators working all summer to make sure that things are much more consistent and better for our families moving forward. There's parent trainings being developed so that they'll understand how to access Google Classrooms and how to help their kids submit. What does Screencastify mean, you know, and things like that. Because it was a little overwhelming, I think, for everybody, teachers included, to learn all these different technologies. And we're in a much better place. And hopefully we'll have almost perfect IEP participation moving forward, because we know we can just Zoom in now when parents are working or have other kids they're taking care of. And so there was a lot of great lessons, I think, moving forward we'll be able to always apply. But even for this August, and making sure that we're meeting parents and kiddos' needs so much better. So thank you.
Angela?
Yeah, so like I had stated before, we are trying to meet everybody's needs by, you know, providing those one-to-one devices. We did have to make a pretty sizable purchase this summer to ensure that we had the capacity to do that. We really only had, when we had closed originally, maybe 90 devices that could be issued out, and our campus is about 250 kids. So, you know, just making sure that we have that, and we're definitely ready now, and we do have the hotspots and the service that we provide to our families. Yeah, and it is kind of, we tried to find the best service for our community, because we're, you know, out in the reservation. Even the service that's here maybe isn't always the best. So, you know, just offering those options to our families, maintaining that, you know, the communication whenever possible. So like some of the inequities that we might have faced, again, just that learning curve that was needed, some of the support that is needed from the parents that we were trying to improve on, and that communication too with our parents we're trying to improve. I just wanted to say that we have a really awesome food service program here that our food service director has really done a good job in, you know, communicating with our families, making sure that we can participate in any of the extra programs that, in addition to the free, you know, breakfast and lunch program that we have here, we're, you know, getting meals actually mailed out to our families for those that were interested. So that's been something that's really awesome to kind of meet some of those needs. And then for our IEP teams, we've done a lot of Zooms, we've done a lot of phone calls, phone conferences, and right now our platform that we've trained in over the summer was utilizing Microsoft Teams as our classroom platform, and we're just working on improving that as well. And it's just been exciting to see, you know, the growth we've made in the short period of time.
Thank you. Teresa?
So, you know, for us, I mean, I think one, because we have such a large community, total 63,000 students, and so our big effort has been on being able to communicate to our families and ensure that the messaging is getting to everybody. And so we know that that's, for us, that is our big effort, is to make sure we're communicating with all of our families, that they're able to reach out and get a hold of their school and understand the processes. to work with our, our community, our business community, and our local government around, what are the needs of certain specific areas in our community that may have higher needs than others, whether it's around access to communication or access to secure food. So we just want to make sure that our parents are aware of all of the information, because it is changing so quickly, and that parents know that how to get their questions answered, how to get their needs met if they're having some difficult times, in addition to everything that's going on, how we can help support them through any other challenges that they're experiencing. So really important is that communication, ensuring that all of our teachers are ready and prepared the first day that we come back, August 4th, in the remote environment, so that that our instruction is consistent from site to site and classroom to classroom. I think that's a very important part of equity, is ensuring that, that guaranteed viable curriculum for all of our students, and that we know that there's consistency out there, and that all students have the same exposure and amount of time that they're interacting with their instructor.
Excellent. We're going to move along to question 6. How do your schools plan to assess the needs for compensatory education for students with disabilities in light of school closures? Susan?
Pass. Just kidding. This is a tough one, you guys. But just know that, this is our first time going through a pandemic and not being able to provide services at this magnitude, especially being, a large district. It's something we've never done before. So I don't have all the magical answers, and I don't know if I'll do it the right way, but I'll take advice from ADE and follow guidance that's given and do our best, because I don't think there's a right answer here. And so I can speak for myself in saying that I'm doing the very best to provide students not just what they're entitled to, but what they need. And that's not an easy thing when you have a lot of students with needs. But we're just start by screening students when school resumes, and get data on IEP goals to assess the need of compensatory education. And a big part of that is having conversations with those that were around them during that time while they were getting their education, and that's the families and the parents. But setting up those individual conversations with teachers and families of the students that do need that compensatory time on the best way to recoup those services. And there's such a wide range of ways to recoup those services. But we're going to try our best to provide some type of framework to help in making those conversations. Not that it's going to be a laundry list, but in the only ideas that we have, but at least it will provide a framework for people to go off of when making those individual decisions, because it isn't going to be everybody at FUSD is going to get this. We're going to have conversations about qualifying for those services, but then also additional conversations of this student may need tutoring, where this student may need more time during the school day. So it's really going to have to be individualized, but trying to put as much structure as possible so we don't all go crazy.
That was a really good answer. And we as parents of children with disabilities, all we can ask is that you do your best. So we appreciate that. Tom?
I'm really thankful for Susan's answer, and I echo a lot of it. It's what's really nice is to hear my colleagues in other school districts thinking and feeling and being afraid or nervous and anxious about the same things that I am personally, right? Because Great Hearts, sure, like we assume that all of our students probably didn't make the progress that we wanted them to do. So we have plans to assess all of our students upon entering and see how much was lost. And then we also need to do individual assessments of our students with IEPs and what progress they did or didn't make on their IEP goals, and establish, like Susan said, some form of instruction or some form of process for deciding which child needs what, and how those decisions will be made. So I'm happy that there are plans for sort of school-wide or class-wide assessments, and that that our special education teachers are also already thinking about their students individually, because what I'm pretty sure is that you know, we're going to need to make this decision for every child, right, who has an IEP, and so we're thinking about how to do that.
We appreciate that. Sarah?
This is a great question, and I agree. I think it's an ongoing topic that we have to think about. And we, as well as, I would assume every district, but you know what happens when you assume, Kathy? I assume everyone's going to assess and take data on their kids. But what I would really hope we would do is, for the most part, let kids come back and get into their routine. And if we, for instance, need to give them more speech services, let's figure that out over time, because if they're accustomed to going twice a week, but we owe them double, is pulling them out of maybe the one class they love, their elective class, every day for a couple of months, is that really effective? You know, like, let's talk about the whole child. Let's get kids back. Let's see where they are. Let's talk about what's best for them and their family to get things back on base. But I just hope that we kind of take things slowly to go fast, because what we don't want to do is then take them out of other things that they actually enjoyed, because we're trying to look at every minute, or I know it's not minute to minute, but trying to make up for lost time, instead of celebrating that they're back, we're here, we're so happy to see you, and get people back in a place where they can show progress and feel safe, and that their needs are being met. So I think most importantly, we want to give kids what they need. That's why we all became special educators, and it's going to look different for every kid, and let's be thoughtful about it before we jump in trying to urgently catch up, because I think they just need to come back and be with us, and be in an environment with their education that's not virtual on Zoom at 9 o'clock, and then OTs trying to send you a video. You know, like, let's come back and be together, and then let's figure it out together, because we are in this together.
Excellent point, Sarah. Thank you. Angela?
Yeah, so I started this conversation with my families, you know, already, sent them out letters and information on what compensatory education is, and kind of what we can do in order to kind of start this conversation, and have, you know, the sort of meetings that, if, you know, we feel like we aren't doing our diligence here at the school, we're not providing that free and appropriate public education to them. So that's something that I've always done, and just want to make sure my parents are advocates of their students with disabilities, making sure that they know exactly what services. So we provided summaries, and something that I'm going to continue to do is provide those summaries. And then what I'm really eager to do in the next couple of weeks is try to assess and determine where our students are, and you know, making sure that we're being as transparent as possible with what the needs of their students are, you know, of our students are, making sure that if we need to, you know, develop a plan for the plan, you know, to work on those deficits. You know, and just being cognizant of the least restrictive environment, that kind of thing. Definitely one of our big focuses here. Like, I just want to mirror kind of what Sarah had mentioned, you know, that's one of the things that we really value at Casablanca, is making sure that we are, you know, providing our students, even those with the most severe disabilities, the opportunity to be a part of the regular education curriculum to the maximum extent possible, even if it's just at recess, you know, just to create that community, or at, you know, at lunchtime or during specials and that kind of thing. It's very valuable for us. And so we just want to make sure that we're doing that with our students, and making sure that we're providing the most appropriate plan for our students, and that our parents have the resources and the guidance, and that they understand what we're talking about when we're you know, developing these compensatory education plans if needed, or for their students. So yeah, it's really a kind of a difficult conversation, but something that we want to make sure our families are very aware of.
Thank you. Very good points, Angela. Teresa?
So again, we're purchasing some additional tools to be able to assess students, both social emotional progress and where they are, and of course reading and math and academics. And so purchasing the new tools we hope will help us collect our data perhaps in a new way, and then being able to, we're really going to focus on structuring our school day to be creative, to help close any gaps or address a lack of progress. So we're really working with our teachers and our principals to understand, once we have the data and we know where we are with our students, and we're communicating with our parents about that data, really looking at how to creatively use some time that exists for us already during the school day, perhaps in very creative ways to address the lack of progress. We also know that we're going to have early releases on Wednesday as we work building professional development for our teachers, and perhaps using that time when appropriate. So we feel like we have time, in the sense that, you know, with some early release time and even just time restructuring some of the school day to have it look different than it has looked traditionally, could open the door for us, for their students that are going to require time and intentional instruction to close any gaps or areas where progress has been delayed. So we feel pretty optimistic. I know initially it was just such an overwhelming thought. What are we going to do, you know, when our students have been away from us and have not made progress? But I think as we look at what our normal school day looks like, and how do we add to that using time that's existing, that I feel like, you know, we've kind of got some potential solutions that are going to be good for kids, good for staff, and good for families.
In the sake of time, thank you, Teresa. In the sake of time, we're going to skip question section, but question 7. But I need to personally thank Susan, Tom, Sarah, Angela, and Teresa. You have given us such fabulous information today. I know that you're going to help me help parents better as they call and ask questions, and I'm sure that that's the feeling of a lot of parents on the phone and on the call today. So thank you so much for all the extra time you put in to answer those questions, but there's fabulous information, and we're so glad to have you today. And I'm going to turn it back over to Amanda.
Yes, thank you so much to each one of the school representatives who joined us today, took time out of their very busy days planning for school reopening to talk with us and answer our questions. We really appreciate it. Before we finish up our webinar today, I wanted to share a resource that parents and families can use, and I did go ahead and post both the English version and Spanish version of this resource in the chat box if you want to click on it. I'm also going to share my screen just to show you what it looks like. So hopefully that will work. So I'm going to go ahead and show, let's see if I can get over to the English version. Oh, sorry. One moment. There we go. So hopefully you all can see this on your screen. So we asked a lot of questions today of our brave special education director volunteers who are willing to come out and share with us. But as we said at the beginning, this is specific to your child's school. So the answers you heard today, I think, hopefully provided a great example of some things schools are doing. Every teacher and administrator is thinking hard about what school reopening is going to look like. But if you have specific questions about your child's school, we really recommend that you get in touch with the school itself. And that might mean reaching out to your child's case manager, favorite or trusted teacher, principal, special education director. And so we just put together some questions. We sort of call these the top 5, but there are questions within questions that you can use just as a jumping off point. And we're sure that many of you have child-specific questions or school site-specific questions already in mind, but if you're not sure where to start, this is a document and a resource you can use as you approach your child's school directly. We're also going to go ahead and post links in the chat box to the Spanish and English evaluations for today's session. Could you, if you have a chance, please click on and complete these evaluations to let us know how we did today. And if you're not able to do it today, we will be sending out these links in a follow-up email, and you'll be able to complete the survey at that point. In that follow-up email, we will also be including links to the recordings of all 3 of our webinars. So if you missed part of today's session, or if you weren't able to tune in for sessions 1 or 2, all 3 will be available online, and you can watch them or share them with friends and other families in Arizona. I really want to thank all of today's presenters again for their time and their willingness to share with us. And I'd like to thank Kathy from Raising Special Kids for her partnership on this webinar series, as well as Natalie from the Arizona Center for Disability Law, John and Nick from the Institute for Human Development at Northern Arizona University, and Jeff from the University of Arizona's Sonoran Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. You have all been a pleasure to work with and invaluable in making this webinar series a success. Thank you to all the students and their parents and family members who joined us today, and to the advocates, professionals, teachers, and school administrators who are working hard to find creative solutions that will benefit students during these difficult times. Have a great evening. Thanks so much.